Hi, I'm Hawi. I am the part host of But First Coffee, as well as the co-founder and co-creator of Awaze Media.
Hi, you probably know me as TG, but my name is Tigist. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of Awaze Media and one half of But First Coffee.
So once upon a time, because it's that long ago, I initially was in a different field and I hated it. And I realized, I think I'm supposed to be a journalist. This is my calling. So I went into journalism at a time where there weren't that many journalists in Ethiopia, so people thought I was crazy. But I had a vision. I knew one day things would change. But I never thought that I would get into radio and podcasting. So this is a treat. And that's kind of how the journey began.
I was a third-year student at Addis Ababa University studying mechanical engineering, and complicated, but I needed to buy a laptop for my classes. At the time, I was trying to get jobs as a waitress, as a concierge, and I got a phone call from an old friend that works at Afro FM, and he just kind of offered me a job, and I was not in a position to decline the job, so I said yes. That led to a 5-year career in radio initially, which is kind of where I learned to hone my craft. So that's really how it started.
So me and TG, our first initial meeting was at a monthly meeting. So we used to work at Afro FM.
It's a place where a lot of great things started. We worked on separate shows, separate shifts, so we didn't really know each other initially until we left Afro. So it was a little bit impulsive on our part because it all started out as a much bigger group and the two of us were not the closest of friends.
And there was a monthly meeting. I was running late. I only worked there for a week, so it was like a test week to see if I would continue working or not. And I was late and they were pranking me to see if they could get me. And they were like, you know what, thank you so much for this first week of yours, but we think that we have all the people we need at Afro and you're not gonna be needed as a part of the team. And I was like, so humble. I was like, you know what, thank you so much. I was like, thank you, I appreciate the opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And they all started busting out laughing. And they're like, girl, you're hired. Just stop being late to these meetings and come on time. And TG was one of the people in the meetings. And I was like, I promise I won't be late. The next few years, I was always late. But that's initially how we met. And before you know it, But First Coffee.
The more time we spent together, I think we sort of understood we had the same vision. And that led to us creating Awaze Media.
Yeah, so the same reason why we wanted to start Awaze. Me and TG felt like there was a space for voices like ours, and we felt like, especially in English, not a lot of people have occupied that space, so we felt like, well, we can't wait for someone else to do it. It has to be us.
We'd already been working on radio, discussing similar topics, and also doing it in an English medium. But we knew eventually we'd have to step out from behind the shadows and actually put a face to the conversations we were having so we would be able to reach a much bigger audience. So we basically took our radio show, gave it very beautiful visuals, and showed up in a video format. But we've been working on it for quite a bit of time.
I think we're a bit delusional in that way. We're like, you know what, we can do this. And so we did. And even the team, I think when we came with the proposal of, hey, would you guys like to do But First Coffee with us? You know, this podcast, I think they were equally delusional in the best way because this is something that's kind of new here in Ethiopia. So that's kind of how it started. So I didn't grow up here. I grew up abroad, and TG grew up in Hawassa. So I felt like our collaboration together was a unique one. I felt like I sort of like had a voice for, the diaspora, and she had, a voice for, the millennial who grew up here. So we felt like coming together, we're sort of like a bridge, creating, I guess, an entirely like new platform to showcase all of our voices. So we kind of felt like we're showcasing a little bit of all Ethiopian millennials, if that makes sense. So yeah.
I think quality is something that we really focused on. Making quality content and not just making it for local consumption, but for an international one was one of the biggest things we emphasized on during our journey. Once we partnered with Budget Creatives, we kind of knew we had the quality that it took for our content to be able to cross boundaries. So for our podcast, what we really want is to be able to make relatable content, whether you're watching from Ethiopia or anywhere else in the world. It's just a way to bring people together and sort of create a family, I suppose, with content.
Our team, actually, we have a group chat in which we are constantly in communication about everything.
It's very lively in there. Everybody just sort of shoots ideas, and we all sort of have the same train of thought, which helps, I suppose, when you work together as partners.
Like we discuss together, like according to like the thumbnail for like the video, or what we're going to write for the caption, or each and every single thing we discuss together. Like we're so like closely knit in that way.
For our like selection process, for example, for interviews, we think of an industry, we think of the first couple of people that come to mind within that industry. And that's kind of how we zero in on our guests. When we pick topics, it's usually driven from our everyday lives, whatever is bothering us that week, whatever is happening in our country. That is pretty much what we draw inspiration from.
We create each episode as a team, and we brainstorm together. We come up with ideas together, who we're going to have as guests together. All of it takes place within our group chat. So I think time was our biggest challenge, in the sense that people kept asking us, when are you guys going to do a podcast? Because we did radio for so long. Me and TG had individual shows, and then we did Awaze together. And we always wanted to do But First Coffee, but there was a wait that, was required. And sometimes you don't have to hate the wait, because I think in the time that we created the podcast, it was the perfect time for But First Coffee. So I think the biggest challenge was, one, things not happening according to our time frame. And then two, doing something new, like a podcast in English, because again, our delusion, that's where it came into play. Us thinking, we can do this, something that hasn't really been tapped. So I think those were kind of our challenges.
Being in Ethiopia and being like, I want an English podcast or an international podcast is not, it's not something that I can point to and be like, well, somebody else did it and they were successful, so I could be successful as well. It was sort of a trial and error type of situation where we had to find somebody to partner with us, which again, Budget Creatives really came in clutch by working with us and seeing the vision and believing in us. So the biggest challenge was finding a partner that was willing to work with us while we kept our entire, creative freedom. We overcame that basically by partnering with them and finding somebody that understood the vision. It doesn't always work out the way it worked out for us, but when it does, I think it's kind of beautiful. But one of my favorite episodes is definitely the one we have with a member of our team, a member of our partners, Budget Creatives, which is Befurdu. It's kind of become my favorite episode. It gave us a chance to sit down and see what his creative look into our show is like. And we constantly talk about the show, but it's always surprising to see what we're creating from another person's perspective. So that episode has kind of grown on me ever since we wrapped up season 1.
The first episode, because I don't think a lot of people know what goes into creating a podcast. There's so many details and so many decisions, and it takes time to it's your baby, so it takes time for it to be what you want it to be before you put it out into the world. And so when we were even looking through the first episode as, our team together with our partners, we were just like, oh my God, like, I love this part, I love that part. And, we just saw everything coming together, and it almost feels like your dream is coming true, if that makes sense. Like seeing your vision come to life. And it gives you like, butterflies and get giddy about it. So the first episode definitely was most memorable for me. So we finished our first season, which, yay, first season's over. And the second season, we're hoping to come bigger and better, in terms of more episodes, more guests, more me and TG. So we're looking forward to just listening to the audience, because we do, read the comments and all, and giving the people what they want, but also bringing more of our vision to the podcast to life too, because there's so many things that we want to share, and so many, people that we want to share the platform with. And we look forward to season 2. So you guys are going to have to wait and see.
Season 2 is so big that the planning stage has taken a few months. Season 1 was more of an introduction, who we are, what we care about. So for season 2, it's kind of our opportunity to flex our muscles a little bit, show you different sides of ourselves, introduce you to different people that we keep within our circles, creative friends. It's also, we're planning for it to be sort of our love letter to Ethiopia, to show all the things we love about our country as well. So I'm really excited for season 2. It's gonna be, I'm gonna say life-changing, but that's just me. That's a personal opinion.